Wait till you get to be my age, you'll see. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Jabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Hare Kṛṣṇa Hare Kṛṣṇa Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rāma Hare Rāma 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 Hare 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 Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtoto that Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtoto that Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. And Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All right. So are we just now beginning 12? Or did we...
we did it last... We're on the text 5, Prabhu.
Text 5. Oh,
Yes, Prabhu.
the voice of God. No doubt about it. Thank you, Tapas. Text 5. So that'll be on page. Yes, famous verse. 512. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 23rd day of September 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 12, Devotional Service, text 5 at the bottom of page 512. Klesho adhikataras tesham avyakta sakta Chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukham dehavadbir avapyate klesho dikatadaste sham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukham Dehavadbhiravapyate Klesho dikadatashtesham Avyakta sakta chetasam Avyakta higatir dukkam Dehavadbhiravapyate Klesho dikadatashtesham Avyakta sakta chetasam Avyakta higatir dukkam Dehavadbhiravapyate Klesho dikadatashtesham Avyakta sakta chetasam Avyakta higatir dukkam Dehavadbhiravapyate. I'm assuming you don't want to try it yet. Not yet. Not yet. Tapas, you there?
Klesho adhikatastesham.
Klesho dikatastesham.
Avyakta sakta chetasam.
Avyakta sakta chetasam.
Avyakta hi gatir dukkam.
Avyakta higatir dukkam.
Deho badbhir avapate.
Dehavadbhiravapyate. Okay, I'll read this word by words. Klesha, trouble. Adhika taraha, very much. Tesham, of them. Avyakta, to the unmanifested. Asakta, attached. Chetasam, of those whose minds. Avyakta, toward the unmanifested. He certainly, gatahi, progress. Dukkam, with trouble. Deha vadbihi, by the embodied. Avapyate, is achieved. Translation. Krishna says, for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Purport. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Jnana Yogis. And persons who are in full Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service to the Lord, are called Bhakti Yogis. Now, here the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome. Whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. Page 513. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. Okay. The individual soul has been embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Therefore, the bhakti yogi accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind, which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form within the temple is not idol worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna, of the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in a temple is saguna worship, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. But the form of the Lord, though represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, or oil paint, is not actually material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. And if I may interject, we can add here stone, wood, oil paint, or pixels. Yes. A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box, or an imitation which we may find somewhere but which is not authorized by the post office, will not do the work. Similarly, God has an authorized representation in the deity form, which is called the Archa Vigraha. This Archa Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all-powerful. Therefore, by his incarnation as Archa Vigraha, he can accept the service of the devotee, just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life. So for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, and they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service, simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances unto the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of food offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that if one ultimately has to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman, and spend his whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised here that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization, because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is eternally an individual soul, and if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he may accomplish the realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature. But the blissful portion is not realized. By the grace of some devotees, such as a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of jnana yoga, by the grace of some devotee, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of jnana yoga, may come to the point of bhakti yoga, or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble, because he cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is partially independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual, blissful self. One should not take up this process. For every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is the danger of turning to atheism. Thus, the process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. It is not advised by Lord Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, in this verse, text 5, Krishna ambiguously recommends that we don't take up this process of impersonal realization. Adhikatara, the word that was so difficult to pronounce in the verse, means very much. Adhikataraha. Very much what? Klesha. Klesha means trouble. And the reason why is in chapter 4, let's see if I can get this right. Chapter 4, text 10, I believe it is. Let's see if I got it. Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha. Yes, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha. Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha Monmayama Mupashita Bhavo Jnana Tapasa Putamud Bhavamagata. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, unless they all attained transcendental love for me. So, in the purport, which I won't read the whole thing, but I'll tell you the gist of it. Prabhupada takes each one of these elements, raga, bhaya, and krodha. This is, vita means free of, so one who is free of these things. Raga means material attachment. Bhaya means fear. And krodha means anger. So then he relates each one of them to a certain class of persons who do not take the bhakti yoga. So the first one is raga. Raga is standard. Raga means material attachment. And this is a very common way why people don't take up the devotional service, even as they may hear about it. And that is they're too much attached to various things in the material world. And so for many of them, it's not even on the radar as something they would want to do. It's just the Hare Kṛṣṇas, they've been around since the 60s, there's some far out sect, and that's all I need to know, and I'm on and on. Let me go on with my life, you see? And that's the vast majority of people. Then you get bhaya. Now the bhaya is fear. Fear applies to the jnanis. They fear that because bhakti yoga, of course, means you're going to keep a form. You're going to have your spiritual form, so to speak. But they think that any kind of form you have is going to be something like this form, with all of its attendant birth, old age, disease, and death, you see? So that's the attraction of formlessness. No more embodiment. Therefore, we don't have to worry about any suffering, any pain, because we won't have any senses, you see? So that bhaya is strong within the heart of those who tend toward the impersonalists. They're ready to go through all the trouble, adhikatara, in order to transcend the bodily form and suppress the senses, because they're too afraid of having a form. Krodha it means anger. And that's reserved for those who, the voidists, because the impersonalists, the traditional personalists, Mayavadis, they don't think that there's nothing out there. They think that there's Brahman, right? Brahman is some substance. It's the white light. It's the impersonal effulgence of the Lord. You know, we understand it that way. They take that Brahman to be the absolute truth, the source of everything. So, but the Buddhists, generally the Buddhists, they want to void everything out. They're different from the Mayavadi. Mayavadis want to also do away with the body and all the varieties and everything, the senses. But they think there's something out there, the Brahman, that they can merge into. You see? We're spirit, that's pure spirit, we'll merge in there and be happy, no more birth and death. But the voidists think that, no, ultimately, you're really going to be happy when you as Prabhupada always uses the word, dismantle this body, and we exist in a complete void. There's nothing out there, and we simply nirvana. Nirvana to them means void, you see. So these are, having too much raga, bhaya, or krodha, or one of them, are impediments to taking up bhakti. And this, I highly recommend this purport. If you have the Bhagavad Gita, at your leisure, check out this text 10, because he goes through all of the three, and then at the end he concludes, one has to get rid of all three stages of material consciousness: attachment to material life, fear of spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. You see? This is void it all out. It's all this too much. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. So back to our bhakti chapter here. So this is you say unequivocal condemnation of this impersonalism. This verse 5 in this chapter. Klesho adhikatatas tesham. It's very, very troublesome. Those who are attached to the unmanifested. They're attached to this conception of just this, ending the birth, old age, and death by returning to our like the merging into the sea of bliss, of pure consciousness. See? But no varieties. There's no interaction. There's no activities. There's no, attachments. But that in itself is an attachment. And in the Bhagavatam, this famous verse, and when the demigods are offering prayers to Krishna in the womb, they've learned that Devaki has got Krishna in the womb, and he's going to take birth. So the demigods come down, and in secret, hidden away, they offer these wonderful prayers. And one of them is Ye Anye. They praise the devotees and they say Anye, but there are others. Anya means others in Sanskrit. Ye Anye Aravindaksha Vimukta Maninas Tvayasta Bhavad Avishuddha Buddhaya Aduha Kṛṣṇa Param Padam Tata Patantyadho Anadvida Yushmarangriya. So this verse Prabhupada would always quote this to illustrate the futility of impersonal realization. It never really works for the embodied soul. So he says, there are others, besides your devotees, O lotus-eyed Lord, Ashtabhavad Avishuddha Buddhaya, whose intelligence is not really purified. Avishuddha Buddhaya. And through great effort, I think I've illustrated it that in Sanskrit, it's full of what they call onomatopeias in English. And not only like splash, right? It sounds like what it means. Splash, or boom. Obviously, there's so many in English. So Sanskrit is full of those also. So this word Kṛṣṇa means very hard effort. You can imagine, I always give this example, okay, you want to transcend, but there's no mantra, there's no Hare Kṛṣṇa, there's no kirtan, there's no prasadam, there's no deities, no devotees, it's just you in your room or maybe on an island somewhere, trying to control your senses, your mind, right? Which of course has so many memories and attachments and things that you got, So that's Kṛṣṇa. It's great effort. You can see how hard it is. That's why it's rare. But there are a few rare souls who are very determined. They rise up. Aruha means to rise up. Aruha Kṛṣṇa Param Padam. Param Padam means the transcendental situation. That's Brahman. Okay, it doesn't mean necessarily the kingdom of God. It can mean just the white light. So Param. Aruha Kṛṣṇa Param Balang Tata Patantyado. From there, they fall down again. Patanti means to fall. Patantyado, down. And here's the key element. Anadvita Yushmarangriya, because they're averse to worshipping your lotus feet. They're not ready to accept the personality of Godhead. That's too afraid for them, because they're thinking, no, I'll have to have another body, and body means this kind of body, and I'll suffer. Anadvita Yushmarangriya. So, Krishna condemns in a similar way here. He says it's very, very troublesome for those who are embodied, that's all of us, and therefore it's not recommended. And he will, I think, recommend in the next verse the process of bhakti, because this whole chapter is about bhakti yoga. So, any questions on this verse? Very famous verse. This is like no mayavad, no jnana yoga. That's going to help. Over here, or over there. Oh, Chad is first. He had something on his mind. Why don't you give him that mic, and you take that mic.
I was just getting it for him.
Oh, you're getting it for him.
I thought it was above me.
Okay. Yes.
It goes with
Cody.
Gaga.
You got to hold it.
Well,
my question is, like, our spiritual body has form.
Yes.
Like, what exactly is that form? Like, how can I, like, be conscious or see myself right now and see others, like, their actual selves right now?
Well,
like
you can't actually do that just by some trick. I mean, that's that's a result of purifying your consciousness and thus purifying your senses, including your vision, where you can actually, I mean, it's very advanced to be able to see the super soul in everyone. And the idea is that, to backtrack, yes, we all have our original spiritual form. And it perfectly corresponds to what we call the rasa. The rasa is your relationship with Krishna, eternal relationship, which we've forgotten. Now, by hearing Krishna's pastimes, how he engages with his parents, we're coming up on this wonderful month called the month of Damodar. Do you know what that is? Kartik? Have you heard of it? No. So this is like, I like to point this. There's a pastime where his mother binds Krishna. Have you heard of that one? Where maybe you haven't read that. You need to get a Krishna book. You need to get you a Krishna book. So Krishna, he reciprocates with his devotees in just the way they want to see him. In other words, there's a book called the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which Srila Prabhupada translated as the Nectar of Devotion. And this is an essential book. This book gives us the reason for practicing devotional service, the techniques for practicing, all the offenses you can commit, you have to try to avoid. And then it gives wonderful examples of all the relationships that Krishna has. There's a whole chapter on what is called the Vatsalya Ras, which is a mother's love for her children, for her children. Obviously we have that in the material world. But there it's in its perfection. So Krishna, he appears as this little baby, and actually grows up as a baby, just so that his parents, and they're actually his step-parents, although they don't know that, they think that they're his real parents. But so his mother can do what they do with babies, suckle the baby, and worry about the baby because he's off in the forest, he's going to hurt his feet, and everything. So all of that is part of this eternal maternal ras, which is called Vatsalya, which also includes a father's relationship with the child. So that's one, and then he grows up a little, and then he gets to play with his friends, and that's another ras called Sakya ras, and we have that in our own life. As you grow up, you're a cute little kid, and your mother takes care of you, and there's a lot of love there. But then you grow out of that, and then you get your friends, and so these are reflections of the eternal ras with Krishna, of the original ras, which is ever fulfilling. And his friends, they don't grow older, they don't grow up and go off to college or anything, They are always playing with Krishna out in the forest, and there's all these adventures. Now, when he comes to earth, there's also the added adventure of seeing him kill all these demons and going through, oh my God, like Krishna gets swallowed up by this big heron, or a stork, called Baka. It's a demon, it's Kamsa, and it's a whole story. Kamsa is a big demon, and he sends his cohort demons to try to kill Krishna. So they all have different animal forms. There's one that comes as a big, huge snake, a python, a gasura, miles long to swallow Krishna. So his friends, they don't know. Well, of course, when it comes to a gasura, they say, well, Krishna's so strong, he can kill him, so we'll just walk into the mouth of the python. Don't worry about it. So Krishna follows in, and Nilademi goes, oh my God, now Krishna's a goner, But then he just expands, chokes the big snake, and he chokes up, and he comes, Krishna, out of his head comes the spirit soul of that Agasura demon, and he waits outside till Krishna walks out with all of his friends, and then he enters into the body of Krishna. The demons can do that. They merge into the body of Krishna. They don't get the rasa, but they get eternal life, merging. So anyway, so Krishna, he wants to reciprocate as we approach him. There's also Dasya Ras, which is just being a servant, which is not so prominent in Vrindavan, but there's some that are just servants, in the mood of the servant. So we all have our original rasa with Krishna, and Bhakti Yoga, the whole process is meant to uncover that. How? By acting as servants in this life. Prabhupada mentions the deity, how important the deity is. And the deity is simply an act of Krishna's mercy. We can't see him in his original beautiful form, spiritual form, with our present eyes, because they're not purified yet. So he comes as a deity, you know, and there's all of these mantras and installation, you know, so that the deity, there's one part of the installation where they remove something that's covering the eyes, and then you see the eyes, and you can really feel the presence of the deity as a person, you know. So that's a wonderful manifestation of Krishna, but the most important manifestation is the holy name. Anytime, any place, you know, you can personally feel Krishna's presence the more you become purified. And we have this incredible, you know, inconceivable truth that the holy name is non-different from Krishna. So if you chant the holy name, you know, and the more attention you pay and the more devotion you have, the more you feel it, but he's there and present. And that's why it's so powerful. There's a movie called Hare Kṛṣṇa. It's on YouTube now. Hare Kṛṣṇa, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all. If you look at it, if you just try to find that on YouTube, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa. It's an incredible story of how Prabhupada came to America. There's footage from that time, and then interviewing devotees who knew him at that time, you know, and it's a wonderful as the whole thing developed. And it's, I mean, I'd seen it once, but I forgot so much of it, and it was just so moving to see it again. We should show it actually sometime. And my good friend Yarubar, his first video was about, I forget what it's called, the Hare Kṛṣṇa people or something like that. It came out in 1974. And we were at the same temple. He was staying in Brooklyn. I was living there. He was doing his videoing there, you know. And I, you know, now my voice is a little bit rough because of all these years, but I was known to have a good, you know, singing voice and speaking voice. So he wanted me to narrate the thing. And I was very, yeah, for sure, you know. I had a sore throat. I did everything in my power to try to get rid of that sore throat. I was standing on my head. I was doing yoga and everything, and I couldn't get rid of it, so he had to get somebody else to do it. Anyway. All right, so where are we? Text 6. Krishna reiterates. Okay. Ye tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha ananyena eva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate tesham aham samudhartha mrityu samsara sagarat pavamina charat partha maya veshit chetasam. Okay, so then the word "but" is here. So he's changing the, you know, from describing that one verse about how it's really, really hard and painful to try to do the impersonal thing. Now he's going to go from here on in the whole chapter to just bhakti. But those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Pritha, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. Purport. It is explicitly stated here that the devotees are very fortunate to be delivered very soon from material existence by the Lord. In pure devotional service, one comes to the realization that God is great and that the individual soul is subordinate to Him. His duty is to render service to the Lord, and if he does not, then he will render service to Maya. As stated before, the Supreme Lord can be appreciated only by devotional service. Therefore, one should be fully devoted. One should fix his mind fully on Krishna in order to achieve Him. One should work only for Krishna. It does not matter in what kind of work one engages, but that work should be done only for Krishna. That is the standard of devotional service. The devotee does not desire any achievement other than pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His life's mission is to please Krishna, and he can sacrifice everything for Krishna's satisfaction, just as Arjuna did in the Battle of Kurukṣetra. The process is very simple. One can devote himself in his occupation and engage at the same time in chanting Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. Such transcendental chanting attracts the devotee to the personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord herein promises that without delay he will deliver a pure devotee thus engaged from the ocean of material existence. Those who are advanced in yoga practice can willfully transfer the soul to whatever planet they like by the yoga process, and others take the opportunity in various ways. But as far as the devotee is concerned, it is clearly stated here that the Lord himself takes him. The devotee does not need to wait to become very experienced in order to transfer himself to the spiritual sky. In the Varaha Purana, this verse appears, Niyami paramam sthanam archar adi gatim vina garudas skandamaropya yatecham anibharitaha. The purport of this verse is that a devotee does not need to practice Ashtanga Yoga in order to transfer his soul to the spiritual planets. The responsibility is taken by the Supreme Lord himself. He clearly states here that he himself becomes the deliverer. A child is completely cared for by his parents, and thus his position is secure. Similarly, a devotee does not need to endeavor to transfer himself by yoga practice to other planets. Rather, the Supreme Lord, by his great mercy, comes at once, riding on his bird carrier Garuda, and at once delivers the devotee from material existence. Although a man who has fallen in the ocean may struggle very hard and may be very expert in swimming, he cannot save himself. But if someone comes and picks him up from the water, then he is easily rescued. Similarly, the Lord picks up the devotee from this material existence. One simply has to practice the easy process of Krishna consciousness and fully engage himself in devotional service. Any intelligent man should always prefer the process of devotional service to all other paths. In the Narayaniya, this is confirmed as follows. Ya vai sadhana sampatti purushartha chatushtaye taya vina tarapnoti naro narayanashrayaha. The purport of this verse is that one should not engage in the different processes of fruitive activity or cultivate knowledge by the mental speculative process. One who is devoted to the Supreme Personality can attain all the benefits derived from other yogic processes, speculation, rituals, sacrifices, charities, etc. That is the specific benediction of devotional service. Simply by chanting the holy name of Krishna, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Kṛṣṇa Kṛṣṇa, Hare Hare, Hare Rāma, Hare Rāma, Rāma Rāma, Hare Hare. A devotee of the Lord can approach the supreme destination easily and happily. But this destination cannot be approached. But this destination cannot be approached by any other process of religion. The conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita is stated in the 18th chapter. Sarva dharmam parityajya mamekang sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshiyasyami mashtuchaha. One should give up all other processes of self-realization and simply execute devotional service in Krishna consciousness. That will enable one to reach the highest perfection of life. There is no need for one to consider the sinful actions of his past life, because the Supreme Lord fully takes charge of him. Therefore, one should not futilely try to deliver himself in spiritual realization. Let everyone take shelter of the Supreme Omnipotent Godhead, Krishna. That is the highest perfection of life. So, no confusion about what's going on here. Yeah, and one thing I was thinking about is that you come to Krishna consciousness, or you could become aware of Krishna consciousness, get a book or something, and it's there's no doubt here. In other words, Prabhupada doesn't say it could be like this, could be like that. You know, he himself having experienced it, and this is what you really have to have faith, that Prabhupada himself is a realized soul. He's in his Siddhadeha, he's experiencing his original relation with Krishna, and that's the foundation of his absolute certainty that Krishna is there, and then he can give you the mercy, and that these words are true. Because after all, especially here in the Bhagavad Gita and in so many passages in the Bhagavatam, it just seems unbelievable. I mean, that was one of the problems with the fifth canto. The fifth canto has a lot of passages. They're not actually verses, they're prose. And just one note about this idea. It's not commonly said that the Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses. What it really has is 18,000 gruntas. Now, a grunta is a verse the size of like the ones we've been reading. Okay, text 5. Okay, so what does it have? There's 2 lines there. You see, two lines, and they're often broken into 4. That's why we chant half the line, right? Klesho dikadastesham, then you chant. So each one of those lines has 8 syllables. Klesho dikadastesham. You know, that's pretty strict. Occasionally they'll add an extra syllable, but that's very rare. So a grunta is 32 syllables, is one of these verse sizes. And you find in the Bhagavatam, for instance, the first verse has, I think, 4 gruntas. I think this has 4 lines, but each one of them has 32 syllables. Now, the Hare Kṛṣṇa mantra itself is a verse. It has 32 syllables, right? 16 words, there's 2 syllables per word. You see? So, the Bhagavatam has 18,000 gruntas, means 18,000 times 32 syllables, you see? Not 18,000 verses. And when you get to the 5th canto, we were going over one verse that's not really a verse. Remember the prayer of Prahlad in the 5th canto? We just said the Prahlad's prayers in the 7th canto, but he also has prayers in the 5th canto. And one of them is this wonderful, we'll just call it a verse because that's easy to call it, but it's not really, it doesn't have the meter. And I'll share it with you because at the end of this verse, at the end of the purport to the verse, Prabhupada says, anyone who wants to be free of material desires should offer his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev, as Prahlad does in this verse. You see? But this is a verse. You see, it has one number to it. 5. What was it? Remember something 18? 5. 5:18:8. See, he knows better than me now. 5:18:8. Thank you. That means you probably looked it up, right?
Yeah, you memorized it.
Yeah. So here's the verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya. Namaste Jastejase Avadavir Bababadda Nakabadda Dangshtakarma Shayan Randhaya Randhaya Tamo Grasa Grasa Om Svaha Abhiyam Abhiyamatmani Bhuhishta Om Kṣṇa. Now that syllable Kṣṇa is Lord Nrsingadev's special syllable. Each of the deities have this special syllable that if you worship them formally, then you should utter that. And doesn't it sound like he's ripping apart Hiranyakasipu? Krishna's is Kleem, very sweet, and Radharani says Shreem, there's no violence there. It's all real, sweetness in life. So, but so the Shingadev. Now, I was working on that book. I was actually working as an editor at that time in LA, and we were on a big marathon. The books had piled up. Prabhupada was very upset they weren't being printed, and there were 17 books that had to be printed as soon as possible. That's a pretty big backlog. So he consolidated all of the editors and the artists and everybody in LA, and then we had 2 months to produce those 17 books, which is inhuman. In other words, immediately the in charge, Ramaswar, he said, Prabhupada, that's impossible. And then he was on a beach walk in Venice Beach, with a lot of sannyasis and devotees and everything. So Prabhupada, he would walk with this little cane. It was a thin cane. So he put the cane into the sand in the beach, right along the beach, where the water is maybe 100 feet or 50 feet away. And he looked right at Rama and says, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. Meaning you have to do it. You have to do it in 2 months, otherwise you're disqualified. So the walk went on, and Ramaswar, kind of laid back. He got to the end of the line, and he was very. I wasn't on the walk, but I heard accounts of it. His main manager of the press, they were very anxiously talking with each other. Can we really do this? What if we do this? What if we do this? So finally, after maybe 5 minutes, they came back. I said, Prabhupada, I think we can do it, but we need your help. We have to be able to consult you wherever you are, means through telex. There was no internet at that time, or maybe a call. And we have to be able to fly everybody, anyone in who we think can help the production. So Prabhupada said, yes, yes, yes. So then the whole thing was on, and I got to work on it after 1 month. The whole thing took 2 months. After a month, I was taken off the BTG, back to Godhead. So there was most of it was the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I worked on, the four chapters in the Antilila. But there were also chapters in the 5th canto. 5th canto was also ready. And the 5th canto, I remember this distinctly, because there's a chapter at the end of the book we read fairly recently. I don't know if you were here. You were here. You've always been here. The description of hell, of hellish planets. It's really hair-raising. So I'm sitting there editing these things, late at night, because you had to work all hours, And actually, they had done illustrations for this chapter. But no one wanted to, and these paintings would find their way in, because a lot of devotees were living in apartments, they would find their way, onto the walls of the apartments, the original. And they would be able to keep them there, at least for some time. But no one wanted to have the pictures of the hellish punishments on their wall, So they ended up in my office. So I'm working on the chapters, I'm looking over there, and there's, this guy throwing off a mountain, or getting stomped under an elephant, or whatever it was, So it was quite an experience. And but in that 5th canto, in addition to that, there were very other important chapters, and this is one of them. The resident of Jambudweep offer prayers to the Lord. And this is a prayer, a very famous prayer, this one to the Shringadev. And the verse after that's Svastastu Vishwashakalak Pasidadam Dhyayantu Bijapura, but then I forget the whole verse. And it's a verse of, may everybody practice bhakti yoga, may the demons become pacified, and everyone will become concerned with each other's welfare if they practice bhakti yoga. It's like a blessing verse. And after 9/11, a lot of the Indians were very upset, because it was such a disastrous thing. How could Krishna let this happen? That type of thing. So I remember we were right in that corner, we had mostly Indians, and I was giving a class on that verse, because it's a prayer of Prahlad that may everyone practice bhakti yoga because they'll become friendly to each other. All of this strife in the world will stop. Everyone will be cool. It's a very nice verse. So that's the verse after this one. You can learn that. So anyway, I'm not sure how I got off on that, but it's definitely enlivening. But here, Lord Krishna is saying in no uncertain terms that besides those foolish impersonalists who are under great, trouble trying to merge into the impersonal, which is unnatural, but those who worship me, giving up all their activities to me and devoted to me, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. And there's an illustration of that. Krishna is coming down to pull out the conditioned soul from the ocean of birth and death on Garuda. So the whole idea is that this is practical for us because Krishna is going to help us. He helps his devotees. He doesn't help the Mayavadis. They don't have any devotion. He responds to love, to devotion. Then he's reciprocal. Just like, we would feel like that. Somebody who has affection for you, who relies on you, dependent, then you're inspired, to help them as much as you can. So we have that same tendency. But Krishna has it infinitely. If we fully surrender, then he's going to be fully helping us. We have to have that faith. And this is another such important thing, and then we'll end here because it's getting late, that Srila Prabhupada himself embodied these qualities. He himself completely relied on Krishna, getting onto that boat with $7, age 70, a cargo ship in the middle of the hurricane season, August, September. Hello, that's the Atlantic is like very dangerous. But Prabhupada had those 2 heart attacks. He said, if I have a third, I'm a goner. Krishna appeared to him in a dream and said, don't worry, I'm taking charge of the ship. And then, very unusually, the whole Atlantic was just like a mirror, very, very calm. So much so that the captain's wife, who was with him on the trip, she was joking with the Swamiji when they got to Boston, can you please return with us? We've never had such a calm crossing of the Atlantic. So Krishna intervened at certain key points, to encourage Srila Prabhupada and give him the strength and empower him to do what he did. And so we can have faith in his words. When he's writing these things, he's not just making it up, he's experiencing it all. And that faith in the reality of all of this, which is really far out stuff, when you think about it, is what can inspire us to practice, sincerely. All right, it's getting real late. I'll give you one little poem. Sense pleasure is a dream. Krishna supreme. The aim is prem, and the way is the name. Or another one. Everybody dies. Nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body. You're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. There you go. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Oh, Krishna. Oh, and thank you all out there in YouTube land. I know you're out there. Hare Kṛṣṇa. Thanks a lot for attending. People write me, I never heard of them before. They said, oh, I always listen to your classes. Thank you. Very enlivening. Now, who's going to remember? Because there's no marker.
I'll find the markers probably.
It's probably in one of the other books. So, okay, so we're on text 8. Text 8 for tomorrow. Page 517.